Hey everybody, Ryan here with Iguana Talk Audio. I'm going to be talking today a little bit about my Behringer digital mixers. I currently have three different digital mixers from Behringer. First is my full-size X32. I also have an X32 Core and then an XR18 from the X-Air series of mixers. They all have their pros and cons and different use cases, but overall they're all excellent mixers. I started out with the full-size X32 and then a pair of S16s for my digital rig. The X32 would sit in your normal front of house position, and then the S16s would sit in a rack up on stage connected with a Cat5e Ethernet cord for a digital snake. That worked really well. I use that for a lot of different seminar gigs and also running sound for bands. When I was running sound for the band, usually we were lucky enough to be able to set up the X32 up front at a front of house type position and then put the S16s up on stage. But there were some where we weren't able to do that. Either there wasn't physically room for it or it just wasn't safe to put the mixer in that location. So we would have to set it up on side of stage or even backstage for some stuff. And that really forced me to use the iPad more to mix out front and mix wirelessly. And that was a different experience for me. It took a little getting used to. But at least I always still had the X32 to fall back on as a safety net. I could always run over there and adjust something if I needed to. Eventually I transitioned from doing just full-time sound for the band to playing guitar full-time and also doing sound. And when we made that shift, it really didn't make sense anymore to have a full-size console just sitting on the side of stage, not getting touched much, when we have a stack of S16s for all of our inputs already, and I have the iPad that I do most of the mixing on. So this was just taking up space more or less, and that prompted my purchase of the X32 Core. Since I already had the rack of S16s, it was real easy just to slip the X32 Core in there, hook it up the same just with the AES-50 ports, the same as I would with this, just without the big physical footprint and of course without the faders. Since I was using the iPad anyway, losing the faders didn't really matter much. Again, it was a little bit of a change to get used to not having any physical faders now. Before, I had the iPad and then I could always go back to the X32 if I needed. But now with the X32 Core, there was no safety net. I need to do everything from the iPad. There was no running over and grabbing a fader if I really needed to. But it didn't take too long and I quickly became comfortable with it. And the band and myself really fell in love with the smaller footprint, all on our single stage rack, drop it down, plug in our mics, plug in my external router, and we're good to go. There's no big board taking up space on the side of the stage or sitting out front, where someone's gonna trip over it. Even though I hadn't had any reliability issues with the X32 Core or with the full-size X32, I was still concerned about not having some sort of backup when we're out on the road. I mean, if we bring out our stage rack and the X32 Core doesn't turn on, we're kind of screwed. Same thing if the S16s don't turn on. So that prompted my purchase of the XR18. This is my backup. This is my insurance policy. So if the main rig, for whatever reason, doesn't turn on one day, I can pull this out of the case, plug in, and we can limp through a gig just fine on this. The XR18 is also a great portable USB recording interface. The S16s and the X32 Core were already pretty portable, but this is about a quarter of the size of that rack, if not smaller. So I can throw this in a case, take a laptop, and go track drums at somebody's house or go track a small band, and then come back and mix all those individual tracks in a studio. This is also great just for smaller gigs where I don't need all the features and functionality of the full X32 family. If I just need a couple of inputs, maybe it's just a small corporate gig, a couple microphones and some playback music, I don't need all that extra stuff. So I can take this and my iPad and go mix that show and have a lot more functionality than if I had just a small analog board. Over time, I modified the S16 and the X32 Core setup to combine everything into a single rack with our other wireless gear as well. So we have the X32 Core, the S16s, all of our wireless microphone receivers, and then also our wireless in-ear monitor transmitters. Everything's pre-wired as much as we can. Everything's plugged in, ready to go. So we pull the rack out of the truck, power it on, plug in the rest of our inputs, and we're ready to go. If I had it to do over today, the one change I would probably make would be getting the X32 rack instead of one of the S16s and the X32 Core. Reason I didn't do that initially is because that wasn't an option. When I first bought the full-size X32, all that was available was the X32 and the S16s. And I knew I wanted to go with the digital snake, and I wanted to have access to all 32 channels remotely right away. So that's why I went with the dual S16 route. Over time, the X32 Core and the rack were released, but since I already had the two S16s, I just went with the Core instead of going with the full rack. Other than that, I've had no second thoughts or complaints about the Behringer digital mixers that I currently have. They've all been great. They continue to work wonderfully. I've been very happy with them every time I've taken them out. If you have any questions about any of my Behringer digital mixers or anything else that I do on the channel, let me know. Thanks.